Marie-Françoise Tereża Martin was born on January 2nd, 1873, and baptized 2 days later on January 4th. 21-year-old Tereża described her earliest memories of home life in France.
All my life, God surrounded me with love. My first memories are imprinted with the most tender smiles and caresses. Those were the sunny years of my childhood.
Generations of Catholics who have admired this young saint called her the Little Flower and found in her short life more inspiration for their own lives than in volumes written by theologians. Yet Tereża died when she was only 24 years old, after having lived as a cloistered Carmelite nun for less than 10 years. She never went on missions, never founded a religious order, never performed great works. The only book of hers, published after her death, was a brief edited version of her journal called Story of a Soul. Within 28 years of her death, the public demand was so great that she was finally canonized. Tereża was born in Lisieux, France, 1873. The pampered daughter of her mother, a talented lace maker, who had wanted to be a saint, and a father, a watchmaker by trade, who had wanted to be a monk. The two married, but were determined that they would be celibate, until a priest told them one day that that was not how God wanted a marriage to work. Within the next 15 years, Zélie Martin bore 9 children, 7 girls and 2 boys.
We lived only for them. They were all our happiness. Zélie Martin.
The Martins' delight in their children turned to shock and sorrow as tragedy relentlessly and mercilessly stalked their little ones. Within 3 years, Zélie's 2 baby boys, a 5-year-old girl and a 6.5-week-old infant girl, all died. Zélie was left numb with sadness, but her faith sustained her through these terrible ordeals. In a letter to her sister-in-law who had lost an infant son, Zélie remembered,
When I closed the eyes of my dear little children and buried them, I felt sorrow through and through. People said to me, it would have been better never to have had them. I couldn't stand such language. My children were not lost forever. Life is short and full of miseries, and we shall find our little ones again, up above.
The Martins' last child was born January 2nd, 1873. She was weak and frail, and doctors feared for the infant's life. The family, now so used to death, was preparing for yet another blow. Zélie wrote of her 3-month-old girl,
I have no hope of saving her. The poor little thing suffers horribly. It breaks your heart to see her.
But the baby girl proved to be much tougher than anyone realized and survived the illness. And a year later,
the baby is full of life, giggles a lot, and is sheer joy to everyone.
death seemed to grant a reprieve to the Martin household. Although suffering had left its mark on mother and father, it was not the scar of bitterness. Louis and Zélie had already found relief and support in their faith. The series of tragedies had intensified the love of Louis and Zélie Martin for each other. They poured out their affections on their 5 surviving daughters. Louis and Zélie named their newborn Marie-Françoise Tereża Martin. A century later, people would know her as Saint Tereża and call her the Little Flower. Tragedy and loss came quickly to Tereża when her mother died of breast cancer when she was only 4.5 years old. Her 16-year-old sister Pauline became her second mother, which made the second loss even worse when Pauline entered a Carmelite convent 5 years later. A few months later, Tereża became so ill with a fever that people thought she was dying. When Tereża saw her sisters praying to a statue of Mary in her room, Tereża also prayed. She saw Mary smile at her, and suddenly she was cured. She tried to keep the grace of the cure secret, but people found out and badgered her with questions about what Mary was wearing, what she looked like. When she refused to give in to their curiosity, they said that she had made the whole thing up. Without realizing it, by the time she was 11 years old, she had developed the habit of mental prayer. She would find a place between her bed and the wall, and in that solitude think about God, life, and eternity. When her other sisters, Marie and Leonie, had left to join the religious orders, Tereża was left alone with her last sister, Celine, and her father. Tereża tells us that she wanted to be good, but that she had an odd way of going about it. This little spoiled queen of her father's would not do any housework. She thought that if she made the beds, she was doing a great favor. Every time Tereża even imagined that someone was criticizing her or did not appreciate her, she would burst into tears. Then she would cry because she had cried. Any inner wall she built to contain her wild emotions crumpled immediately before the tiniest comment. Tereża wanted to enter the Carmelite convent to join Pauline and Marie, but how could she convince others that she could handle the rigors of Carmelite life if she could not handle her own emotional outbursts? She had prayed that Jesus would help her, but there was no sign of an answer. On Christmas Day in 1886, the 14-year-old hurried home from church. In France, young children left their shoes by the hearth at Christmas, and then parents would fill them with gifts. By 14, most children outgrew this custom, but her sister Celine did not want Tereża to grow up, so they continued to leave presents in baby Tereża's shoes. As she and Celine climbed the stairs to take off their hats, their father's voice rose up from the parlor below. Standing over the shoes, he sighed.
Thank goodness, that's the last time we should have this kind of thing. Louis Martin.
Something incredible had happened to Tereża. Jesus had come into her heart and done what she could not do herself. He made her more sensitive to her father's feelings than her own. She swallowed her tears, walked slowly down the stairs, and exclaimed over the gifts in the shoes, as if she had never heard a word her father had said. The following year she entered the convent. In her autobiography she referred to this Christmas as her conversion. Tereża would be known as the Little Flower, but she had a will of steel. When the superior of the Carmelite convent refused to take Tereża because she was so young, the formerly shy little girl went to the bishop. And when the bishop also said no, she decided to go over his head as well. Her father and sister took her on a pilgrimage to Rome to try to get her mind off this crazy idea. Finally, they went for an audience with the Pope. They had been forbidden to speak to him, but that didn't stop Tereża. As soon as she got near him, she begged that he let her enter the Carmelite convent. She had to be carried out by 2 of the guards. But the vicar general, who had seen her courage, was impressed, and soon Tereża was admitted to the Carmelite convent that her sisters Pauline and Marie had already joined. Her romantic ideas of convent life and suffering soon met up with reality in a way she had never expected. Her father suffered a series of strokes that left him affected not only physically but mentally. When he began hallucinating and grabbed for a gun as if going into battle, he was taken to an asylum for the insane. Horrified, Tereża learned of the humiliation of the father she adored and admired, and of the gossip and pity of their so-called friends. As a cloistered nun, she could not visit her father. This began a horrible time of suffering when she experienced such dryness in prayer that she stated,
Jesus isn't doing much to keep the conversation going.
She was so grief-stricken that she often fell asleep in prayer. She consoled herself by saying that mothers love children when they lie asleep in their arms, so that God must love her when she slept during prayer. She knew as a Carmelite nun she would never be able to perform great deeds.
Love proves itself by deeds. So how am I to show my love? Great deeds are forbidden me. The only way I can prove my love is by scattering flowers. And these flowers are every little sacrifice, every glance and word, and the doing of the least actions for love.
She took every chance to sacrifice, no matter how small it would seem. She smiled at the sisters she didn't like. She ate everything that she was given without complaining, so much so that she was often given the worst leftovers. One time she was accused of breaking a vase when she was not at fault. Instead of arguing, she sank to her knees and begged forgiveness. These little sacrifices cost her more than bigger ones, for those went unrecognized by others. No one told her how wonderful she was for these little secret humiliations and good deeds. When her sister Pauline was elected prioress, she asked Tereża for the ultimate sacrifice. Because of politics in the convent, many of the sisters feared that the Martin family would take over the convent. Therefore, Pauline had asked Tereża to remain a novice in order to allay the fears of the others that the 3 sisters would push everyone else around. This meant she would never be a fully professed nun, that she would always have to ask permission for everything she did. This sacrifice was made a little sweeter when her sister Celine entered the convent after her father's death. 4 of the sisters were now together once again. Tereża continued to worry about how she could achieve holiness in the life she led. She did not want to be just good, she wanted to be a saint. She thought there must be a way for people living hidden little lives like hers.
I feel in me the vocation of the priest. I have the vocation of the apostle. Martyrdom was the dream of my youth, and this dream has grown with me. Considering the mystical body of the church, I desired to see myself in them all. Charity gave me the key to my vocation. I understood that the church had an art, and that this art was burning with love. I understood that love comprised all vocations, that love was everything, that it embraced all times and places. In a word, that it was eternal. Then, in the excess of my delirious joy, I cried out, "Oh Jesus, my love, my vocation, at last I have found it. My vocation is love."
When an antagonist was elected prioress, new political suspicions and plotting sprang up. The concern over the Martin sisters perhaps was not exaggerated. In this small convent, they now made up 1/5 of the population. Despite this, and the fact that Tereża was a permanent novice, they put her in charge of the other novices. Then, in 1896, she became ill. She kept working without telling anyone until she became so sick a year later that everyone knew it. Worst of all, she had lost her joy and confidence and felt she would die without leaving anything behind. Her sister Pauline already had her writing down her memoirs and wanted her to continue so they would have something to circulate on her life after her death. Tereża's pain was so great that she said if she had not had faith, she would have taken her own life without hesitation. But she tried to remain smiling and cheerful, and succeeded so well that some thought she was only pretending to be ill. Her one thing she wanted to be able to do after her death, helping those here on earth. Tereża died on September 30th, 1897, at the age of 24. She herself felt it was a blessing that God had allowed her to die at exactly that age. She had always felt that she had a vocation to be a priest, and felt God let her die at the age she would have been ordained if she had been a man, so that she would not have to suffer.
I will return. My heaven will be spent on earth.
After she died, everything at the convent went back to normal. But her sister Pauline had put together Tereża's writings and sent 2,000 copies to other convents. But Tereża's little way of trusting in Jesus to make her holy and relying on small daily sacrifices instead of great deeds appealed to the thousands of Catholics and others who were trying to find holiness in ordinary lives. Within 2 years, the Martin family had to move because her notoriety was so great, and by 1925, she had been canonized. Tereża of Lisieux is one of the patron saints of the missions, not because she ever went anywhere, but because of her special love of the missions and the prayers and letters she gave in the support of missionaries. This is a reminder to all of us who feel that we can do nothing, that it is the little things that keep God's kingdom growing.